Awakened Living is a 21st century movement for people who consider themselves spiritual but not religious, who have a deep hunger for connected community and a divine impulse for personal and global transformation. Our mission is to encourage and inspire the awakening of human consciousness. Welcome to Awakened Living Television. My name is TJ Woodward. I'm the host of your show. Welcome to our 80th episode. It's hard to imagine some years back when we started Awakened Living Television that we would be here, our 80th time, being in conversation about 21st century spirituality. And I always say, if the word spirituality doesn't work for you, perhaps it could be framed as we're in conversation about how to live our most dynamic, connected, and abundant life. So pleased this evening to have Rev Verona Garland with us as our guest. Rev Verona serves as the staff minister at Awakened Living along with me and Rev Joan Stedman, and we are creating quite an amazing community. I'm so grateful for her presence, for her vitality, for her vibration, and her vibrance. So you will soon experience that for yourself if you don't know Rev Verona. What we're going to be talking about this evening is surrender and letting go. And releasing. What needs to be released? What stories, what ideas, what belief? What does it mean to surrender? So I'm really excited about being in this conversation. Verona, welcome to the show.
Thank you, TJ.
So incredibly grateful that you're here.
Thank you.
I love being in partnership with you. Before we begin, can you take a minute or so and let viewers know a little bit about you?
Yes, I'd love to. So I am a Emerson Theological certified Science of Mind minister and also an Interfaith minister. However, actually what I am is a discovery scout, discovering everything there is to know about spirit in, through, and as me, and also being a scout for those who are on the path, on the journey, as well as I'm an adventurer in spirit. I love adventuring into the time, space, possibilities of spirit, and adventuring into all those things that are ours to know, to grow, to blossom into, and to be.
Well, wow, that sounds like a fun place to start. So let's talk about surrender. When you hear the word surrender, or when we say, if someone were to say to you, what do you mean when you say surrender? What do you mean when you say surrender? What comes up for you in that topic?
Two things come up for me with the word surrender. What has come up in the past is the old beliefs about surrender, which is there's some weakness in it, and that I'm giving something up that I really value and that I really needed up until now. However, the real truth about surrender is that you're giving unto yourself that's yours to have. You're going within and really surrendering into that's already been within you and is within you, and now it's available. It's coming up for your discovery. It's coming up for your recognition, awareness, and acceptance.
Yeah, I love that. And I also think about, earlier in my life in kind of more traditional churches or traditional Christianity, surrender certainly meant like an idea of letting go of my will and surrendering into God's will. Now, it's interesting because it's still the same for me, but my definition or idea or concept of God has changed. In other words, it's not like me and my will is so inherently wrong or bad, that idea being taught that, and that I'm surrendering to some power up there. Now it's about surrendering to that God self. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about that.
Absolutely, because when we were surrendering before, it was surrendering to something, or at least for me in my Judeo-Christian upbringing, surrendering to something on the outside of me.
Yes.
And now in the knowingness that God is within me, that I am what God is, that I'm that sacred space where God expresses itself. Now I know that it's really, the surrender is really in this dynamic play and this dynamic give and take with spirit within and as me, so that it's really something so much more comforting, something so much more organic and fluid and flexible, because it's really surrendering into that which I've always been.
Now I love this, of course, because surrendering to that which we've always been is something really different than surrendering to something up there and out there. Mm-hmm. So I'm really curious, based on that, how would we know, and this is something that I would love to be in conversation, both of us can offer perspective on this, what it means then to surrender my will. We hear a lot about surrendering my will to God's will or divine will. So how do I know which part of myself is the part that needs to surrender and which part I'm surrendering to? I don't know if I'm being clear, but surrendering from, surrendering to. Like, is it my ego, my thoughts? in that new paradigm, what does surrender, what does that mean?
Well, part of it, I'm glad you touched upon the ego, because our ego, sometimes we think that, okay, so once we're in new thought, or once we've gotten away from the old ethics, that ego is something that we just need to throw away. And our ego actually does serve a lot of very valuable purposes for us. However, when it comes to surrender, it's an opportunity to really just allow our ego to step back. And to really be in that space and place of non-egoism, of spirit within, that part of us that really has no words. However, we know it, we feel it, we are it, and it is who and what we are. So as far as our will, there's really, in my opinion, or in the way I look at things, the will is that is already our knowingness. Yeah, it's not our will. It's already our knowingness. It's already that we've known since before time began, and maybe we just, up until now, we're not comfortable accepting that we know it, or being in that awareness.
I love that, because there's such a difference between that will, that force, versus that knowingness. I love the way you're saying that. I'm thinking of David Hawkins' book, Power versus Force, because it's, it's like I spent a lot of my life trying to force situations, and that's that ego, right? That ego that, like, to me, the ego is sorting, separating the old stories, the force, the trying to make things happen. You're talking about that knowingness, that innate knowingness that we really come in with, right? Surrendering to that. And it's so much easier, for one thing, isn't it?
It's so much easier. And it comes down to even basic examples of things that, let's say you're driving down the street and you don't have your GPS on, and you really are not sure where you're going. If you really just take a deep breath and surrender into that knowingness will tell you which way to turn, what street to go on, or not even what street to go on, but which way to turn and what direction to go, which is really just a good metaphor for our lives. If you surrender to the knowingness, it shows you the direction. It's the idea of, and it's the opportunity to actually listen.
I love that. I love that, because it is true, when we tap into that deeper place, there is a knowingness there that guides us. It feels so gentle to me too. I can kind of sense if I'm in my ego, if I'm trying to, like, if there's a lot of resistance or a lot of trying to push. You're talking about tapping into that, that it is a GPS, right? That internal guidance system that can help direct us. So here's the big question that a lot of our viewers might be asking. How do I, one, cultivate, because I think there's two conversations here. One, cultivating a relationship with that. Let's start with that, and then also what needs to be let go of. I mean, actually, we could do it in either order. What needs to be let go of so we can experience that? So in terms of the cultivation piece, how do we learn how to cultivate a relationship with that internal knowing?
Well, we have a lot of tools in our spiritual toolkit to cultivate that we may not even be aware of. One of the ways to cultivate that is to be in the silence. And actually, I like to say, make friends with the silence, and know that in the silence, it's really not silence. There's a lot of conversation going on with spirit in the silence. So that's one of the ways, is to tap into that by being in the silence. Another way to tap into it is to really do some experiments, really be scientific about it and do some experiments, really think on something and allow yourself to listen to that answer that you get from within, and then also allow yourself to have the egoic answer and see which one fits the best. See which one works the best. See which one, as it outpictures itself, really actually brings you to that place of knowingness and that place of completion. So that's several of the ways we can. And the other way that you can do it is to allow yourself to love yourself in a way that you know that you know that you know. Okay.
I love that. Do you even know that you know that you know that I have been saying that for so long?
No.
That you know that you know that you know. That's one of the things I love saying, because when I get to that place of that, I think we really experience a very different sense of reality. Because I lived so many years thinking that what I saw in the visible realm was what reality was. And when I got to that place that I knew that I knew that I knew, all of a sudden everything seemed to shift. And I really love that you're talking about it like an experiment. You didn't use that exact word, but it's an experiment. Let me see what happens when I listen to that inner knowing, and let me see what happens when I don't listen to the inner knowing, right? Because I've done both.
Absolutely. And the thing that maybe some viewers may be still thinking, and in what way can I make this happen? Well, part of it is being willing to be willing. to be willing, you know,
Yes.
because I know that I know that I know you and I understand and accept this. However, if you give yourself an opportunity to say, okay, I'm willing to be willing. I'm willing to be willing to know that I know that I know that I know. Then that really just, it gives me a visual of gears turning in a machine. It gets the gears moving and it activates the law on our behalf. And then things start unfolding and rolling and happening.
So when we talk about new thought or a new paradigm, and you know, I know new thought is really ancient wisdom as well,
Absolutely.
right? You know, so much ancient wisdom. The mystics for centuries have been saying what we're now calling new thought,
Yes.
which of course is great because, anyway, the point of this question is when we get to this place, this teaching that teaches us that we came in as essentially whole and perfect, that we came in really knowing the truth of who and what we were or are. Little children have an innate sense of their connection with what we might call God or source or love or light. And then we begin to either have that taught out of us, sometimes it's even a traumatic experience. We lose sense of that essential self, that connection. So as an adult then, or as a spiritual being on this pathway, this practice, it becomes much more about what we need to release and let go of so that we can remember the truth of who we are. So I just wanted to offer that. That's the framework we're talking about. So then let's move into the conversation about what gets released and let go of, and how, one, it could be how do we do that? And then two, anything you want to say about sort of that framework that I offered that we always have within us, that innate knowing.
I'd love to. So that innate knowing that's within us, you know, there's several, just what you alluded to, a lot of layers get put on top, you know. It's kind of like all the layers in an onion, all those layers get put on top. And we get so accustomed to carrying those layers around that we have no idea that they're layers we're carrying around until we get into a situation or an opportunity for growth where it kind of slams us to the wall and we get to take a look at it. So one of the ways to allow yourself to peel those things off is to bless those things as they show up and know that, gosh, this is old programming. This is old tapes, so to speak, that are running in my head or running even in my heart. And so I allow myself to give thanks for them, bless them, and then send them on their way. Just be in the knowingness that as you're in the awareness, as you bless them and give thanks for them, that's giving permission for it to dissolve. Yeah, that's giving for permission for. Also, just like when you peel an onion, that's giving permission for the new fresh layer to show up.
Yeah.
And then that new fresh layer, it's really not new and fresh. It's the layer that we, as you said, came in with.
Yeah.
And that we've just, it's gotten covered up by societal norms, by our parental loving blessings, by all sorts of things.
Yeah, and I love that you didn't use this exact word, but start with gratitude for what is.
Yes.
Always like the gratitude. It's like, oh, here's this pattern again. Because I spent a good decade trying to get rid of all of that. And I was doing it, I was going to say I was going to do it aggressively, but kind of passive aggressively.
Okay.
I kind of was, I didn't want to acknowledge that it was real. I was trying to push away those old beliefs. I was using a lot of internal dialogue that was rather violent, actually. I didn't recognize it at the end. Like I was trying to shut the mind up. What I hear you saying is like, let's be grateful for it. Let's look at it. Here's this pattern that's been here. The way I like to language it is like, here's this thing that I thought was keeping me safe.
Yes.
Here's this old belief in this story. Thank you for keeping me safe for all of these years, and now I'm ready to peel that layer and go down to something deeper, something more authentic. You talked about something that I want to really bring some focus to. A lot of times in New Thought circles, there is not a lot of focus or willingness to look at the shadow. And you talked about sometimes life blesses us with that moment where the stuff quits hurting and there's pain, or quits working and there's pain there. We maybe feel up against a wall and there's a point where we can break into a new consciousness. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to talk a little bit about that.
Certainly. I'd love to let everyone know that first, pain is one of the greatest blessings that I have ever had in my life. And that, you know, the pain pushes and the vision pulls, of course. And so when we get to that place of pain, when you get to that, you know, it's kind of like when you get to the depth of the darkest night of the soul, when you get to the deepest, darkest part, when you get in the valley of the shadow and you don't know really what's going to happen, then that's really, an eruption of, or an opening up of, or an uncovering of the truth of who and what we all are. And so that when we get to that place of absolute surrender, where you realize, okay, I get to let go. That all these things that, like you said, all these things in my head that have been going on, all this violent forcefulness that's been going on in my head, that this is not working. It is not working at all. In fact, it feels like it's making it worse. So that we get to be in that place of absolute, like, ground zero, where here's where I am, and it is a place of safety and comfort. Even if it feels painful, it's a place where I can allow myself to renew that I already am.
Yes, that is so beautiful, because those moments have been the most profound for me. And it's the way I say it is, there's nothing more painful than 99% surrender. And I've been at that 99% place where, everything seems to stop working. And what's different in this new, in a more awakened state, let's say that, because we're always constantly evolving, right? As we raise our vibration and raise our conscious awareness, I can experience something that looks on the outside the same, but I'm seeing it from a very different vantage point. So anytime there's pain in my life, I now say, oh, isn't this wonderful? Because I know something's wanting to emerge here. And that happens individually and collectively. If something is happening in the outer realm that people are calling horrific, I say, what if this is us wanting to grow and expand? So it's really leaning in and saying, something's wanting to be born here. And that is true. That's the place where we reach that dark night and that ultimate surrender. And then it's like, we can rest in that which we've always been.
Absolutely. And I love that you said if it's collective pain, because in the collective pain, we get an opportunity to say, okay, and so what's the pain within me that I get to take a look at, that I get to work on, that I get to expose and be aware of? Because whatever pain is within me, it vibrates out into the collective pain. So you're right, the collective pain, I love that, is because there's something wanting to emerge. And we're all on the same vibrational we're all in the same vibrational field, and so that it's all vibrating together. And now, wow, there's something spectacular ready to emerge, because it's ready to emerge because I'm ready for it now.
Yeah, and I love that you talked about being accountable for the pain that we're seeing, right? Because if I'm not willing to work on all my shadow, and what I mean by shadow is just that stuff I want to bury and pretend like it's not there. It's a very simplistic way of saying it. When I'm burying that, then I start projecting like, oh, look how bad that person is, or look how horrible. What I hear you saying is, in what way have I been that way?
Yes.
I went to a workshop once where everyone, the facilitator said, underneath your chair there is a word taped to the bottom of the chair, and I want you to get with a partner and convince your partner how you've been that word. Now the word might be loving, or the word might be murderer. The word might be thief. And so the idea is, rather than projecting it all outward, I acknowledge. And what I do is, if I find myself getting activated by something or someone, I start with, in what ways have I been that in the world? And I can always find it.
Oh, yeah.
I can always find it. And then it's compassion for self and others.
And I love that, because if I get activated, that person who's activating me is holding a mirror in front of me. Yeah, it's mirroring for me, which is a wonderful technique. It's mirroring for me. Okay, this is ready for you to take a look at. This is ready for you to bless and send on its way. And this is up for you now, which is a wonderful, spectacular thing. Even if it might feel shaky, scary, wobbly, wiggly, any of those things. Because, now I get to see that. It's like Gandhi had said so long ago, be the peace you want to see. It's any emotion that comes up, then be that. Yeah, give yourself an opportunity to be that by taking a look at, how is it I am that? Like you said, those words. How is it I might be a murderer? What is it I've murdered?
Yeah. And what I love also, what you're saying, what I'm hearing is, if I'm getting activated, it's something within me that wants to heal.
Yes.
Because it's never about them. And I'm going to be really clear, it's never about them, right? If I'm being activated, and if I'm finding that surge of energy, that activation of that feeling frustrated or angry, that's about me. It's not about them. Don Miguel Ruiz, in his book, The Four Agreements, says, it's not your words that have hurt me, it's that you've touched a wound.
Oh.
And when I'm able, as my good friend Reverend Temple Hayes says, woundology, when I'm able to own my own woundology, and I say, ooh, look at this, there's something still there. And when there's something still there within me, it's always something that wants to heal, as long as I'm willing to be with it and turn into it.
Yes.
Not turn into it, but turn toward it.
Toward it, yeah. Into, in the real true sense of it. And what I love about this is that you and I are talking about and really giving our viewers an opportunity to know that surrender is about this. And as we surrender into those things willingly and joyously and gratefully, then it heals. Like you said, it's up to be healed. Yeah. And even when it comes in a way that you might feel snarky about, it's still up to be healed.
Yeah. And what I love what you're saying is we have a choice, right? So it's not, for me in my own journey, what I hoped spirituality would be is that I'd never have another human feeling, that I'd never have another scenario in my life that was challenging. What's happened, here's the paradoxical nature, right? Once I was willing to accept it all, once I was willing to say, ooh, here's an opportunity, then suddenly it really does feel like there's very little now in my life that feels disruptive or that feels like there's something inherently wrong there, because I've decided that it's fertilizer. Shift happens, fertilizer happens.
And something that just came up for me is, when we were talking about being in the darkness, it's always darkest before the dawn, which is something that we all know. And so that, like you said, shift happens. It always comes up to be healed. And then when we get to that point of absolutely thinking, whoa, the stuff is not working out the way I expected, then it's gratifying and also affirming when the light comes, the light that's always in us, the light that shines from within and without. For the change.
And the deepest, to me, what was showing up for me when you were talking, the deepest purpose of all of this is to be useful, right? Because I've walked through my own shadows time and time again, right? Had those dark nights, walked through that, had this emergence experience of recognizing that it was all fertilizer for transformation. I get to be a witness now, a consciousness for other people doing that same work. And I know that's true for you as well.
Absolutely. For me, part of being in ministry is that I get to be a witness for other people doing that work. I get to be that container of absolute compassion for people doing that work. And also I get to understand and know, you're doing this work and you're bringing it to me, and it's possibly a refresher for me also, refresher course for me, so that, I can be there, stand in witness and steadfast faith for those who are also doing the same thing.
Yeah, and what I love about what we've created at Awaken Living is we call it authentic spiritual community. We're now, of course, as you know, and our viewers know by now, that we're associated with Agape, with Reverend Michael Beckwith in Los Angeles. And that also is a community dedicated to authentic spirituality. Like, we bring ourselves fully into the room. It's not about the ministers being oh so enlightened. It's about all of us being in the process of our own evolution with the person in front of us, whether that's speaking on a Sunday morning, meeting with someone one-on-one, or in your incredible Wednesday evening service, which, let's talk about that for a moment.
Yes. So we have the Wednesday experience at Awaken Living, and it is an opportunity to refresh and replenish yourself in spirituality in the middle of the week in what's called Hump Day. And it also is an opportunity to play with and interact with spirituality in completely different ways than we have thought of before, completely different ways than you might on Sunday, because it's very interactive, it's experiential, and we do something that's out of the box. That's completely like you might go home and think, I haven't ever done that before in spiritual play. However, it is something that opens us, expands us, grows us, and gives us an opportunity to be in witness of the truth that we all are, in the authenticity of what we all are. Because just like you said, as the minister, I'm learning and growing also. We're co-creating and learning and growing and expanding and being open to the vulnerability of spirit together.
I love that. So believe it or not, we're almost out of time.
Wow.
It goes so quickly, doesn't it?
Yes.
So anything that you want to say sort of in closing, if you will, about surrender, about releasing, any closing thoughts about that? Anything that feels, obviously our conversation could go on forever, and it is. Anything in this moment that wants to emerge that you'd like to speak to?
Well, what wants to emerge in this moment, what's coming through for me, is that surrender is our blessing. Surrender and release are the blessings that Spirit gives to itself because it loves itself so very much in, through, and as each one of us. Each one of us, as we know, is the delight of the divine. And so surrender is really our blessing. So when you are in a place and space where you're thinking that maybe I don't have any blessings or maybe things aren't working for me, it is wonderful to get to know, aha, surrender and release are two blessings that are always there. They're always available to me, and I can do them to any intensity or depth that I desire, because once you start that, it activates the law. And then blessings unfold and manifestations and demonstrations make themselves known, and you're on your way again.
How wonderful. Well, this has been a delight. A couple of things. One, would you like to come back for next week and do another show?
I would love to.
We'll be with what wants to emerge as a topic for that.
Okay.
And in closing, would you let our viewers know a little bit about how to contact you? I know you have a new fabulous website.
Yes. The best way to contact me is www.veronagarland.com. I'll be looking forward to getting a message from you.
Okay, so thank you to all of you, our viewers, for being in this conversation about how we awaken to our most dynamic self, how we embrace this new paradigm of oneness, and how we shift our awareness away from what isn't going well in our life, what are the difficulties of our life. We shift that into what's the opportunity for growth here? What is the fertilizing effect that this is wanting to have on me? How do I use this experience for the fuel for my own transformation, and therefore the incredible shift that's happening in consciousness on the planet? Mm-hmm. What I want to say to you, the viewer, wherever you are right in this moment, that what you are holding in your heart, in your mind, and in your spirit makes a difference on the planet. Mm-hmm. Because as each of us wake up more and more to the truth of who and what we are, it affects the planet in a very powerful and profound way. So the greatest transformation work we can do for the planet is that of our own transformation. You make a big difference in the world. So thank you for doing your own work, your own surrendering to this greater reality, your own surrendering from ego to a place of knowing the absolute truth of who you are, which is love, is light, is spirit. So for more information about Awakened Living, you can visit us online at awakenedliving.us or awakenedliving.us, as we like to say. If you're in the Oakland area, come visit us on Sunday mornings, Wednesday evenings. We have classes, we have workshops. For more information about me and my work, you can visit tjwoodward.com. Thank you so much for being with us, and good night.